So, where does Scripture itself encourage us to think critically? Well, it encouraged humans to use their minds to examine truth claims. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, "Test everything, hold fast what is good."
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that you have to practice the first part, the test everything, in order to develop the wisdom to recognize and hold on to the good. So it's not just a one or the other. In order for you to know what is good, we should test things. And clearly, I think we're at a point in time where we have an overabundance of truth claims out there. I mean, we have political jokes out there that says, these are alternative facts, or this is my truth. I mean, how many times have we heard those kind of platitudes? And so now, instead of dealing with, the Platonists of the day, or the Aristotle, or whoever the main kind of thinker that needs revolution, you now have individual philosophies that are coming at you, and so we need to test those things and see if there are good things about them. And how does our Christian meta explanation encourage us to take those ideas in? And so we shouldn't be scared of those ideas, of looking at them. There's not spooky magical incantations that we can't hear when we stick our fingers in our ear. But and I think the church has done that in the past and has faulted because of it.
Yeah, and it's almost become a cliche, but again, we shouldn't check our brains at the door.
Right.
As Christians, right? We need to use critical thinking principles.
I mean, think about walking into church. What do you do after you sit down after the singing? And even singing right now, I mean, it's reading words. What's the thing that you do if you're in a good, solid biblical church? You crack open a book. I mean, if you're doing that, you're not switching off your mind.
Right.
Christians must be independent thinkers with tools to think critically about diverse points of view, weighing the evidence and judging the validity of the arguments. Proverbs 18:17 says, "The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him." And I mean, you watch crime shows and you're like, oh yeah, he did it, until Perry Mason steps up. Perry Mason's an old TV show that I used to watch, so no one understands that reference. But he always gets someone to crack, or there's somebody out in the audience that says, "Hold on a second, I've got something to add," and it breaks the case wide open. So
I don't think he ever lost any of his cases.
Never did. Yeah, he always had Mr. Berger to help him out too. Yeah. Some Christians seem to think that a way to avoid being conformed to the world, as Romans 12:2 says, is avoiding worldly ideas. But G.K. Chesterton says that a better strategy is to learn the skills to critically evaluate them. It's more dangerous to the person who has not studied them. Yeah. And that's some of her examples in her book is, oh, my son, my daughter, they went off to college, and I thought I had protected them, but now they're learning this crazy thing called psychology and B.F. Skinner or Darwinism, and I've tried to protect them. It's like, well, what do you expect unless you keep them?
It's like viruses, right? I mean, you don't protect yourself. You don't overcome a virus by trying to necessarily avoid it. Actually, you get it inoculated, right? And then you get some of the virus in you so that you're able to fight it off, right? So if you never hear of a particular idea, and then now you're away from home and away from support, and all of a sudden you're bombarded with that idea, it's easier for you to be susceptible to that sort of thing. But if you've been inoculated by thinking, by hearing these various ideas, before, now you're able to, pretty much fend for yourself, as it were, and fight off those type of ideas. It's kind of like you've developed antibodies.
Right. Yeah. It's antibodies need to kind of figure out what they're attacking in order to conform themselves to fighting it. And so that's what these 5 principles are helping you to do. And again, these aren't step 1 through 5. It's an overarching scheme in order to get you to think about the information that you're taking in. And I think it's a pretty decent one. And she says that the 5 principles will empower you to cut to the heart of any worldview and weigh its central tenets to gain understanding of the times in which we live. And she obviously uses the Romans 1 strategy that she covered at the beginning. And so in this chapter, we'll study several key applications to show how critical thinking can save your faith. And we kind of pick up on one of her books for art, Saving Leonardo. So that's definitely one to pick up if you're into that. And Francis Schaeffer has also written about that in some of his books that's really interesting. It's definitely, you wouldn't think that the Christian worldview talks about, how do you look at a Picasso painting and find kind of God in it? And it's like, well, here's Francis Schaeffer just breaking it down really well. And it was pretty interesting for a short little book to kind of knock you out. And I really enjoyed it. So a unique feature of Romans 1 strategy is to be applied universally to analyze and respond to any theory. And so the church is not prepared. And so I think it's becoming better because we're having to respond to so many different ideas and so many different attacks. And, we're in a post-Christian world, and now we have to deal with when fiction books come out like Da Vinci Code, and now, is my faith founded on a lie? And the Freemasons have sought to make me believe that Jesus didn't really die, and he had children with Mary Magdalene, and my whole purpose in life is to kneel before her grave, which is, God, oh man, it was such a stupid ending. Oh, I can't believe anyone liked that book. But all right, that's neither here nor there. So let's remind ourselves of the 5 principles. We've definitely dug into them in previous episodes, but this is a good reminder for us once we get into further of this chapter. So principle 1 is, of course, to identify the idol. You kind of have to know the target of what you hit. And so anything that's a God substitute is going to replace God with something. And again, this is to just briefly go over these points, so I won't kind of give examples or hit some of the main points. But if you've been through our episodes before, you'll know where we're going. So identify the idol is principle 1. Principle 2 is to identify the reduction. Because you're replacing something in the place of God, you have to reduce things. And of course, she focused on humanity, how these different worldviews reduce humanity to something less than what they are. But you can also do it with reason. You can do it with science. You can do it with materialism. You can do it with a whole slew of things of identifying what it reduces. So things like free will and those items.
It's eliminated and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Right.
And she says here that it's dehumanizing.
Right. In
terms of because it rules out. It has to rule out because it's not looking at the whole.
Right. And then principle 3 is to test the worldview against the facts of experience, the truth of general revelation. So we can kind of view this as the looking out approach. What does it say about the world that we see, and does it have explanation? So if it says something like it appears or it may seem, those are your flashing keywords for this is important. This is to identify. This is a reduction. This is something where it says, oh, it appears this way, but it really doesn't. And so there has to be a sufficient explanation there. It just can't be. Well, it can't be that way because I think the outcome of it would be icky.
Or it's just an illusion or whatever, right?
Yeah.
In other words, you're not meeting the world as it presents itself. You're kind of dismissing it as a result of your philosophical ideas that won't allow those types of things to be explained.
Right.
So you explain them away.
Yeah, it would be something akin to saying that you have a view of Christianity where evil doesn't exist, and you just explain away all the evils of mankind by saying, oh, it's all an illusion. Well, your opponent's going to call you out and saying, well, you're not actively looking at how humanity has acted for all of its history. And you should reevaluate then your worldview and see if it offers a full explanation for that. And so there might be ways in which we've been looking at what we view as things like free will incorrectly. And so we need to be able to not just hold fast to our traditions, but actually go back to what our ultimate source of explanation is and see if it stands the test. If it doesn't, it should be discarded. And so we do that also with principle 4, show that every reductionist worldview is self-defeating. So this is the internal critique. Right. This is the famous there are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure? I mean, there's that. So you're
self-referentially incoherent.
Yeah. Does whatever it say when it's applied to themselves destroy itself.
Right.
And so we looked at a lot of those, and it seems like a lot of them come up short or do themselves in enough. And then, of course, Principle 5 may be one of the most important ones, because we just don't chop them off at their knees and say, all right, see you later, Black Knight. You're not just sitting there with no arms, no legs. We're gonna give you some legs to stand on, and whether or not you choose to pick it up is entirely up to you with God's providence. But it's to make the case for the Christian worldview. So talk about why the worldview fails both externally and internally, and how it reduces humanity and how it replaces God. But then say, and here's where Christianity offers a better explanation. Here's an idea of free will that conforms with the reality of Scripture, which is your ultimate standard, and then also offers a better explanation of, no, you do have choices, they do have consequences, that the material world is there, but that's not all that there is. There's other explanation powers other than science that lead you to scientism. There's things like logic and reason, and those aren't illusions. They're real, and they exist outside humanity. It's how God thinks. And so, how does a non-physical, how does a physical universe with no, non-spiritual, non-physical entities produce reason that seems to work everywhere and seems to guide universal all thought? And the very fact of using it, explains itself, kind of deal. So Christianity offers that kind of meta-narrative, that thing that even rises above reason, science, and morality. And so those are the things that we should look at as we get into the rest of the chapter.
Yeah, and she makes the point here that by identifying the points where non-Christians are freeloading, right, we can be confident that we're addressing areas where they sense a need for something more. Right, so they're freeloading in terms of they don't have any explanation for these things, right? So they're taking them out of the Christian worldview, and so we put our finger on that and point that out, because that needs to be explained, that needs to be dealt with, and that's a way in terms of the conversation and working with and through with those folks.